A question I get asked a lot is, hey Chris, how can I put these programming and engineering skills into action with paid projects? When you're looking to land a job as a professional developer, it's common to struggle to find impactful projects with a decent pay. But at TopTal, you'll find just that. Unlike a normal 9-to-5 job, TopTal is 100% remote, which means that you get to design your own lifestyle by picking your own hours and working from anywhere. As a developer with TopTal, you'll get to choose innovative projects from the world's leading Fortune 500 companies and Silicon Valley startups. TopTal takes care of all the billing and invoicing, ensuring you get paid on time at the rate that you decide every time. If you're ready to accelerate your engineering skills by working with world-class clients, head over to toptaljobs.com or click on the link in the description tab below and fill out the form. Hey guys, what's up? So in this video, we're going to be talking about GitHub and really what you need to know in order to be a GitHub developer, or at least a developer that uses GitHub. And there's a lot of reasons why you want to use this platform. The number one reason is because everybody else is. I mean, there's literally millions of developers that use GitHub. And not just developers that are creating their own projects, but now entire companies are moving their stack over to GitHub so that all that code is maintained via GitHub servers. And in this video, I just really want to explain some of the benefits of being on GitHub, and also a few things that you need to know in order to actually be somebody that can work your way around this platform pretty well. So as young developers out there, especially people that are looking to get their first opportunity in this career, you might be wondering, like, why do I need to be on GitHub? And for the longest time, I actually didn't even use version control when I was first getting started. And the lack of any version control system knowledge, I think, really impaired me when I first started working in a professional environment. That was one of my biggest hurdles to have to jump through, was the overall just version control system. And at the time, I was using something called Team Foundation Server, which was a Microsoft product for a C#.NET application. But the sooner you can get involved in actual version control and understand the different nuances of it, like branching, merging, commits, things like that, the concepts are they're basically the same. So even if you're not going to be using GitHub, if your company uses another competitor product that we'll talk about in a moment, it helps to learn this type of product in order for you to understand how large development code bases come together with teams that are distributed across the country or across the world. A lot of people use GitHub because of the fact that it has the best online user interface for a website. It's all web-based. We understand, once we've been doing this for a little while, okay, I need to see where all the commits are, or I need to report a bug, or I need to talk to the developers on the project, or here you can see GitHub is notifying me that this project has a dependency on another project that has some sort of security vulnerability. And this was reported to me without me having to look it up on Google or to find out the hard way or anything like that. It's simply telling me, and it also emails me. So there's a lot of different benefits to this overall platform that developers really like. But one of the other major benefits, especially for somebody that's trying to get a job in this industry, is that the code is publicly available, assuming you want it to be. But it allows for discoverability, not just with your project, but also you as a single developer. It makes it very easy to kind of see what type of work you're doing. And although you can't see work that you're doing on private repositories, a lot of work I think that is done out there, and especially on this platform, is for public repositories. And actual job recruiters and companies and the managers that hire you are actually looking at your GitHub profile to see what type of stuff you're messing around with. So I wouldn't say that you should just spam all your code on this platform, because one of the things that they will look for are things like clean code and just the type of work that you're doing. Like, you don't really need a hello world HTML file and have a project for that, if you know what I mean. Like, nobody's going to be impressed with that. Nobody's going to hire you based off of that. It doesn't mean that you can't have that if you wanted to. Like, for me, I don't really care, because like I already have enough corporate development experience, in my opinion. This is really just a playground for me. My code isn't the best on this platform, simply because I'm not trying to develop anything too in-depth for the most part. But a lot of this stuff is really just based on tutorials. Like, this bare bones React was a tutorial project that I was creating. And I mean, I'm sure that, like, it's not, there's no comments, there's no unit tests, there's nothing that I would say, hey, check out this project because this thing shows everything I need to know. But I think that there's a combination of both. Like if you're trying to get a job, then to have like a large project or at least a clean coded project is going to help you a lot. But yeah, I would probably be somewhat skeptical of just like spamming all of your code that is normally on your computer to GitHub for everybody to see it, because we all know that we have some, some garbage code from time to time. But that's kind of besides the point. But the thing is that this platform allows for discoverability, and projects can be trending and other people can find your projects. We have this star-based system where people can star your project. People can watch it so they can see any sort of changes that are made to it, and you get emails and updates for that. So the overall platform itself is very useful for developers for a lot of reasons. Now, GitHub itself is a free tool. It used to be something where if you wanted to have private repositories, you would have to pay for a GitHub account. And if you've ever wondered why people have this pro tag, it's really people that are now donating to GitHub, because I pay $5 a month. And I guess for the $5, for all I know, as far as I know, the only thing I get is this pro tag next to my name for whatever reason. A lot of people might ask about that, but that comes simply because I pay for the product. And the reason why I pay for it is because I'm too lazy to cancel. And I don't mind donating to GitHub, to be honest with you, but also like when I was first paying for it, the reason why is because I wanted to have private repositories where not everybody was seeing my code base, because that is one of the big things, that if you're developing something and it's experimental or you don't want somebody stealing your code or something like that, then GitHub wasn't the best place for you. So you'd have to buy a paid account so that way you could have a private repository that other people couldn't see. And a lot of times you don't want people to see your project until it's ready. One of the things I've found in development is anytime you go forward with somebody, like even if you're trying to discuss something with a team, you're working on something, if you got some half-finished shit, like it's usually a bad idea to go out and like show people, in my opinion, because then you just get more questions than you're answering questions for. So it's just like I think it's a bad look overall. So a lot of times with projects, you just want to make sure that there's at least some sort of minimal delivery available before you start showing the world. So these days, though, GitHub is completely free, so you can actually have private repositories without having to pay. All right, so a few things that you need to know when getting started with this platform before you can like really jump in and start contributing to other people's code bases. I think it's important that you set up a few of your own, because otherwise you're just not going to know the ropes of how to deal with a very complicated code base that might be in existence already, like something like React. It's going to be a lot harder to contribute to the React project if you've never actually done any sort of commits or anything like that yourself. So here are some of the technologies that you need to focus on to get started on this platform. Number one is that GitHub gets its name because it's based off of Git, which is a version control system written in C by Linus Torvalds, the guy who created Linux, or the main guy behind it. And this product is ultimately what powers a lot of other competitor products too. So we'll talk about some of the competitors, but the good news is that even if you're not going to be using GitHub, a lot of other version control systems are now using Git as well. So you don't have to completely relearn the ropes of version control every time. So Git is by far and away the most popular version control system out there. And it's not exactly easy for beginners, because really like it's somewhat of a complicated process that I think new programmers really struggle with. Like they don't understand the real reasons for all this stuff. And the real reason is because software development is hard as hell. Like it is hard to keep everybody on the same page. It's hard to figure out, okay, this dude changed this file, I changed this file, what lines are, he changed line 16 through 24, and I changed lines 48 through 72, or sometimes we change the same lines together. Whose version is correct and all this other stuff. And if you had like some sort of system where it was just like everybody uploaded their files like and just overwrote everything, then you would have just absolute chaos. So that is, that's why Git is in existence. So it prevents that chaos as much as possible. But you'll see in especially professional development, whenever you're dealing with version control systems and merges and a lot of large code bases or a lot of developers working on the same code base, it's an absolute nightmare a lot of times. So you'll see in professional development, a lot of the ropes and hoops that we jump through is all about tracking work and then figuring out how to get that work deployed. And that's like at least 50% of the battle of being a software developer. All right, now guys, when it comes to Git, there is a lot involved in Git. There's going to be some crazy edge cases that you will run into at different times. But the thing is that you don't have to be an expert in Git. I think that you could just focus on some of the beginner tutorials. And if you want to know a recommendation, you can check out my buddy Brad Traversi's Git crash course. I think it's a great course to just get into some of the basics of Git where you don't have to be an expert in it. But after you go through the 30-minute tutorial, you'll be in a good position to create your own code base and then figure out how to do branching, merging, commits, and things like that. All right, so every GitHub project out there, if you don't provide a license, then you're going to have copyright by default. So nobody can just steal your shit. But I mean, people still will. So it's a good idea to actually have some sort of license. If you do want your project to be something that people can fork and add to and use within their projects, which most people do because that's how you get the most recognition. Even some of these large code bases that cost millions of dollars for companies, they have these open like MIT licenses to allow everybody to contribute to it, because overall most of the software we use these days is open source and freely contributed and free to use. However, there's all kinds of different licenses out there that restrict exactly how we can use the content. So every project should have, I like this, do what the F you want, public license, that's awesome. But you can see all these different license types. The most common is MIT, I'd say, at least these days. One of my favorite ones, which isn't mentioned here, is the Don't Be a Dick license. It's probably one of the best ones I've ever seen. But it's like, just don't be a dick, like, if you're going to just don't just copy the repository, change the name, and selling unmodified or unoriginal or original work with no work done whatsoever. That's really being a dick, meaning that you just took the entire code base that somebody else wrote and then started selling it, and then gave no revenue or whatever to the person that actually created it. That's definitely being a donkey dick. But anyway, it even mentions donkey dick down here. That's so funny. All right, so yeah, the licenses. So every project has a license, and that's something that you should also look into. All right, the next thing is going to be a git ignore file, and this is mostly to do with actual Git, but with every GitHub project, you typically see something that's called a .git ignore, all one word, and you can see the little Git icon here. But this will say is specifically what type of files or folders you want to exclude from the version control system. When you're dealing with a modern day Node.js project, every Node project pretty much has dependencies on other things, and like, you ultimately end up downloading like half the internet by just installing a simple project. But you can see like this project that I have on this latest React tutorial I was working on, I don't even have that many dependencies, but look at all those modules that got brought in, because ultimately just installing these few dependencies here brought in all that other stuff. So you don't typically want to track those types of changes because you're not making changes to that actual source. Most people are not changing the source within their node modules folder. But anyway, the git ignore allows you to specify specific file types, folders, files, etc. to say, hey, I don't want Git tracking this, and I don't want this stuff uploaded to GitHub. All right, so the next thing is going to be a README file. Every project on GitHub has a README, and it's typically uppercase README, and then just .md for Markdown file. So Markdown is something that goes back at least 15 years. It was created actually in the first language I actually learned, which was Perl. And I believe it still uses Perl. But ultimately what this is that you're writing a text-based file using a bunch of different weird semantics, meaning the way you write the code. And then it turns it into like an HTML version of that. So every major GitHub project is using a README to display things like the documentation on how to use it, the overall description of the project. And here's an example. This is React here. So if we look down, you can see the readme.md here. And if you look at this, like all this stuff right here, all this text and everything is all written inside the README. And that's one of the easiest ways to actually contribute to a project. So you'll see a lot of developers out there. It looks like they contributed to like React and Django and all these different big things. And all they're doing is going in and like updating the README file, which is very easy to do. So it's actually one of the easiest ways that you can start contributing to projects, simply looking for things like, missed phrases, typos and things like that, and then submitting that. But here is, if we were to go and edit this file using GitHub, then you can see this is all the markdown content here. So like, let me just, I'll just copy this, and you can see that it's written in a very weird way. But if I were to do the same thing in my README and just copy this right in here, the best way to learn Markdown is simply looking at other projects and seeing how things are laid out. There's also a tool available by Markdown itself that gives you instant feedback on how to use it. And the main website for Markdown is this thing called Daring Fireball. It's kind of weird, but this is like literally the official documentation for it. But there's also a tool that's based off of it here, so you can actually get, like I said, that instant feedback. And this tells you on the right-hand side all the different things that you can do, like block quotes, putting links and images inside your documentation. And then if you're using Visual Studio Code like I am, you can also right-click, and this thing will say Open Preview, and that gives you a preview of what your Markdown file looks like. And that's basically what GitHub is going to show on that main page. And that's based off of your README. All right, so another thing that a lot of YouTubers actually gloss over, especially YouTubers that are teaching people how to do this stuff, is like they don't talk about unit testing enough, but most major projects on GitHub have some sort of unit testing, and it goes into something called CI/CD, which is continuous integration, continuous delivery. And there's now these separate projects that we link to GitHub that basically do things like running our tests. So like here you can see that if we were to look at the MD here, you could see that these are just links out to servers. Like here's the Circle CI server for React. So if I were to copy that and then navigate to it, that's going to show you all the tests and everything that are being run, and all the commits and basically the tests that were being run here. So you can see this is like every time they do a deployment on like a React code base, you can see here's all the testing here. So it's like spin up the environment. It's like, but all your unit testing, all your linting, meaning like making sure that you're actually following the right conventions for coding and all that stuff, those are these days checked on products called continuous integration servers. And like here's Circle CI, which is a popular one. But there's other things like Travis CI, and then like Buddy CI is a new one that is gaining popularity. But what these things do is they actually are on their own separate servers, and they link to GitHub. And when you check your code in from your personal computer to GitHub, it uses something called a webhook to then notify whatever CI tool you're using. So if it's Circle CI, Circle CI is listening for that hook. And then they get the message, hey, some new code got submitted. So they grab the code, they run it through all the tests for different environments. And they can also do things like deploying your code base out to like your development environment, your production environment, or however many different environments you have. All that stuff can be automated using these tools. And they're pretty imperative to learn, but like it's more of like, I would say, a DevOps type of career path. But if you want to be a full stack developer, especially somebody that understands and can put together all this stuff, like you're definitely going to be in a good position to get hired, because this is the problems that all companies are facing. You can see some of these large companies down here that are using this. They use this for a reason, and it's so that they can deliver code quickly. And GitHub integrates with all of these tools very, very well because it's the largest platform for coding. So the good news is a lot of these tools are free, and if they're not free, they're still free for individual developers, especially for trial periods. And you can go ahead and create your own GitHub project pretty easily, set up an account on something like Circle CI or Buddy CI or one of these other ones that you like, and then you have a fully documented project out there that is using all the latest tools that all these major companies are using. And those are the type of projects that will really, make yourself stand out from other people. Because here is this React project. It's better that if you were going to create your own React project based off of my tutorial or somebody else's, that you go ahead and add all these other tools in, put it on GitHub, and then have all this stuff automated. I'm going to get into more tutorials on actually how to integrating the CI/CD tools and also with unit testing. And it's all going to be based off of this React tutorial that I had created previously, but we're just going to continue to expand it until we have a full-fledged, like, modern day, really complicated website that's not really for beginners, but I think that, at least if you can get through it all, you're not a beginner anymore, really. All right, guys, before I start going into some specific examples, I do want to mention a few competitors out there because GitHub isn't the only option out there. There are some other big products out there, and Bitbucket is probably the second in contention to everything, maybe the third, honestly. Microsoft still has a product which they call their Azure DevOps server. That used to be called Team Foundation server. And for all the .NET Microsoft people, I know that Microsoft loves to change their terminology, but this is the new name for it. It's called Azure DevOps server. But really, this thing is using Git under the covers, and yeah, so it's basically the same thing as Bitbucket. And then another one is GitLab. So if you guys have ever heard of that, these are all different products that are trying to be an alternative to GitHub. It's also interesting to note that GitHub is actually now owned by Microsoft. So in some ways, Microsoft either I don't even know what they're. Yeah, it's interesting, right? So they have their own product, but really GitHub was more about an open source kind of vision, I think, with like I said, the discoverability of your code. A lot of corporations, they don't want those types of features. So Microsoft still has kind of competing products, even though they own GitHub. All right, so an example of how I would actually put my code here on GitHub, just so you guys can see it for the React tutorial. A lot of people were asking me about that. But I'm just going to say the name of this project. So it's called Total React Tutorial. And I'll say, you could just put this right here, documentation coming soon or something. I mean, that's kind of a terrible thing to put in there, but whatever. And now that I have this, what I'm going to do is, because I already have Git installed on my machine, I'm going to go ahead and open up my Git Bash because I'm on Windows. And Git Bash gives you more of a Linux type environment, command line interface, which Git uses. And it's also just less buggy. Like, so for whatever reason, Microsoft is very buggy with the Git integration with its command line versus this Git Bash, which is much more closer to the Linux command line. All right, guys, so here's my GitHub profile. If I wanted to see all the repositories, I just go to my repositories. As an example here, because I'm creating a new repository for that tutorial I just created, I'm going to create the project for it. All right, anyway, you guys can see what I'm doing here. And we're going to say that it's public. We're not going to initialize it with a README since we already have one. So I'm just going to, in fact, you know what? We'll add the license later. So I'll say create repository. And then here you end up getting this address, this URL for the Git repository. And right now there's nothing in it. So this is the first thing you see when you create a completely empty repository. There's nothing in there, not a single file. And if you have an existing code base like we do with this React tutorial, what I'm going to do is navigate to the command line via Git. And again, I'm using Git Bash because I'm on Windows, but if you're on like Linux or Mac, then you probably just have your terminal open to whatever root directory of your project. And you're going to say git init, which is going to initialize an empty repository. By default, your first, there's always going to be one master branch of your repository, and that is like the really the source of truth for your project. As development is done with individual developers or even you as a developer, a lot of times you don't want to mess with your master code if it's working. So you're going to branch off a new branch from master and then start making your changes in that. And then eventually once things are working, you like the way it is, you merge that into your master branch. But a lot of hot and heavy development is usually not done in master. It's done on branches that are branched off of master. All right, so now that we've done that, we have this empty repository. What we need to do is we need to tell it to use that GitHub URL that we just created. All right, so a few of those basic commands, like if you do git status, this will tell you all the files that are in red that are like new files that are added to the project. Since it's a brand new repository, we haven't actually committed any of these files. Those are all the things that Git is picking up on, saying, hey, you created this empty repository. We have all these files here. I'm assuming you want to do something with it. So we want to add it to our project, and we're just going to say git add dot, which means git add. It adds all of them. So now if I say git status, you see that these are all green. They're new files. They're in the repository now. They're waiting to be checked in. But what you need to do to check something in, you need to git commit it and then -m for a message. And then inside of single quotes, you're just going to give some sort of message. So a lot of times with the first one, it just says first commit, which is pretty self-explanatory that you got like new code going in. All right, so now everything is ready to go. It says git status, nothing to commit. It's all there. So it's all committed into your repository. The problem is your repository is not synced up to GitHub. So you need to go ahead and say something called git remote add origin, and then the URL of the web address. What the hell was that? Basically, I copied and pasted something I did not want to do. So I'm going to say git remote add origin, and then I'm going to paste in the address to that web URL to my Git repository, and just press enter. All right, so now that that's done, we want to git push it to the repository. But the first time you do this, because you haven't synced up your local to GitHub, you want to set the upstream origin master. So we've already identified what our master was. So let's just go ahead and say git push, and it actually tells you exactly what to type in here. So we're saying set upstream origin master. And again, we already told it where the origin was. So it's actually now pointing to GitHub. It knows that it's on GitHub, and it's asking for my username and password. And I put it in wrong. All right, that time I put it in right. All right, so this is going through. It just reached across the web and it pushed all that stuff into the repository we just created. And then now if I go back to my repository, I refresh, you can see all those files that I just put in there. So now for I have all this stuff now pointing to Facebook too. I should probably update that. But you can see when we go into our commit, we have one commit. So we have our comment there, first commit. And you can see all the files that we pushed in, and they're all there and stuff. That's all for the React tutorial I just released. So if you guys are interested in that, check it out. And also now what I want to do, though, because I have my README that is copying stuff from Facebook, I want to go ahead and remove that React stuff, obviously. So I'm not even sure. Oh, yeah, look, it's all up here. I'm sorry. I didn't even see that there. So let's go ahead and remove all that stuff. So I can press Control S, save it, go back to this, and you're going to see again, if I say git status, modified README, say git add, git commit, updated README, and I'm going to say git push. And I don't have to do that set upstream stuff anymore. You just have to do that the first time. And just like that, I pushed another change to my GitHub repository. And now when we go to refresh this, we have total React tutorial, blah, blah, blah. And now we have 2 commits. So if I go to the main part, I have 2 commits here, and you can see updated README is the second commit. The red stuff is files that that have changed, and that the red is what was removed, and green is what was added. So you can see this is not green because that was there before. So we simply just remove stuff, and that's why it's only red. But whenever you see like a commit and you're looking at red versus green, red is removed, green is updated. All right, guys, so that's basically it with GitHub. There's a lot more that you're going to run into, and I think it's really important that you try to get these projects set up on these tools that everybody else is using, because it really does allow you to separate yourself from somebody who graduated a boot camp and knows things about React and HTML, blah, blah, blah. If you can show that you also know all this stuff, and you actually provide your code that people can see, then it's really going to go a long way. I mean, that's what really people are looking for. A manager just recently commented the other day, and they said that they're like, yeah, anytime I hear like a React developer, I think this guy only knows React, I'm not going to hire him and stuff like that. One of the best ways to show that you know way more than that is to put your code out there so everybody can see it. And also make sure you guys check out my newsletter. So if you go to codehawk.com, you're going to be greeted with a pop-up that just it applies to my mailing list. So if you guys could put your email in there, and then that way I can get in contact with you outside of YouTube, and I won't spam you or anything like that. So I'm trying to collect all my users there as well, so I can get in contact with you guys outside of the specific platform. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and have a good day. Take care. Bye.